Welcome to Civitai.com, the home of the generative AI art community. If you enjoy this video, please consider hitting us with a like and subscribing, as it'll go a long way in helping us continue to bring you the highest quality AI community content. Please enjoy the video. Guys, welcome to a very special Civitai AiR Artist in Residence live stream. Today we are joined by the very talented Drew. I don't want to butcher your last name. Why don't you tell him what your last name is?
Nikonowicz.
Nikonowicz. So Drew is part of the most recent cohort of the Civitai Artist in Residence program. Chris is our Civitai art director, and he kind of runs and oversees the entire Civitai AiR program. So I'm going to let Chris kind of go ahead and give Drew an intro, and then we'll just get to talking, because I'm sure there are going to be a lot of takeaways and a lot of gems from this conversation today.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Drew came into the program just, I guess, like 6 weeks ago or something. Wasn't it? It was kind of a short stint.
Beginning of summer.
Yeah, beginning of summer. Currently pursuing his Master of Fine Arts at the University of Arkansas. He's a photographer working in what I would call the conceptual photography space. He's a published photographer too. He published his book, This World and Others Like It, in 2019, won the Aperture Portfolio Prize, Lens Scratch Student Prize. He's won a lot of awards, gotten a lot of accolades. And I was drawn to his work specifically to his project, This World and Others Like It, and sort of invited him to be in the program. He also runs his own large format camera company called Standard Cameras, where you produce, is it 4x5 and 8x10s?
No 8x10. Everybody wants an 8x10, but
okay, got it. And those
That's
are,
cool.
Sheet film photography, which I actually do some of myself. So anyway, I was really interested in his work and invited him to participate. So yeah, Drew, what do you have to say for yourself?
I would do it all again. No, I don't know. Hello, my name is Drew. Yeah, I mean, when you reached out, I didn't know anything about Civitai, and I sort of saw it as an opportunity to just like try to use a tool that I hadn't used before. Like you said, I do a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats, and Chris and I have talked a bunch of times during the residency about like how I find myself regularly trying new things just for the sake of trying them. Like we went on a very long diatribe about like ROM hacking video games for one of our meetings. And it's just like, I find myself doing all of these random things that are in fact maybe not random. And it's more just like, I see a lot of sort of like creative benefit in my own practice from trying lots of different and new things. And so in this case, it's to try out and like see what I might be able to come up with using the tools that like Civitai has available. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, okay. So prior to coming into this and Chris reaching out to you, did you have any experience using AI? Were you even slightly familiar with the tool sets or what was available at all prior to the AiR program?
I mean, like being a photographer, I feel like I was conversationally aware of these things, and like I wouldn't say I'd ever personally used any like generative tools, but I've definitely like crossed paths with the more like expected AI tools. Like I've definitely used my fair share of ChatGPT, and something that the way I kind of think about a generative tool like this or ChatGPT or really anything that sort of falls under that same umbrella is I see it as sort of like a diagnostic tool. And being a person who is interested in learning lots of new things, and also like my photography practice is pretty, what I would call non-hierarchical. Like I don't demand film photographs. I don't demand a certain kind of medium. Like I want things to kind of live and shape together. That was kind of the approach I had to this and coming into it. So to answer your question, like with generative tools to like create visuals, I had no experience whatsoever, but I definitely had my fair share of run-ins with especially like text-based AI. And I'd say most of the use cases I was implementing were diagnostic. Tell me what you think about this text. What do you think this text is about? And then using that as like a space for brainstorming, which is in a lot of ways almost has nothing to do with visual generative AI. Like they feel totally different in my brain.
But on that note too, just talking about the text-based AIs too, I personally think that right now, if in like this day and age, if you do not have some type of ongoing personal relationship with some LLM, that you are missing out on a whole other realm of productivity possibilities for yourself.
Yeah, I could see that. I would say, I think for me personally, like being a person who makes art and occupies a space that is, for better and for worse, like always going to be adjacent to these tools and these, I don't know another word to use, these tools. I feel like I would be a fool to not have some relationship with it, just in terms of like understanding how they work on a basic level. And if it manifests to a point of like, oh man, I can use this in a productive way, awesome. But I think more than anything, it's just like, it is an emerging technology that is very much adjacent to a space that I occupy. And for that reason alone, I just like, I feel like I have to, be aware of it.
Absolutely. Do you think, and before we dive into what you started doing with Civitai AiR, just because I'm really curious, since you very much like, damn, you make and sell your own cameras. That to me, even just like the thought of that sounds insane. One, I want to know how you got into doing that, but two, also, do you think that a lot of folks that are in the more traditional side of making art, which, is almost everyone, right, that haven't quite really grasped what these things are capable of, or even tried to really play with it? Do you think that going forward, people might have a little bit of a uphill battle as these things get more advanced, if they don't start adopting and testing it out in their workflows just a little bit?
Oh man, that's a big question. For starters, with the cameras, kind of a humble beginning. In undergrad, I started to design a 3D printed 4x5, and I started to take it kind of seriously when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to afford a 4x5 when I graduated. And then I kind of shelved the project. I did a year-long residency. I was invited to a place called Fabrica, which was incredible, best year of my life. Fully funded, paid for experience. Nothing like it. And when I came back, it was like, oh shoot, I need a job. And so I picked the project back up and kind of really like finished it, did a Kickstarter, and then ultimately like have since then been making and selling cameras pretty much every month. Pays my rent. So that answers the camera side of things. Do I think people will fall behind? I don't want to editorialize your question. I don't think so. I think it's one of those things where it's like, I think that you would be, I feel like I just want to come back to what I said before, which is just like, I think it's important to be aware of things that exist and are happening. Like, I don't think that you have to like these things. I don't think that you have to dislike them. I think that it's okay to approach a thing and be like, I don't actually know how I feel about this. I see what some people are saying about it, and I see what other people are saying about it, and they don't align. And so I'm going to just take sort of the investigative role of figuring out how I feel about it. And I think that practice is really crucial. So I don't know that I would go so far. I feel like I don't know enough to say, oh yeah, people are going to be falling behind. They're going to be lost. But I do feel like, I mean, I don't know. I do feel like it's important. It's like anything. You can turn on the TV and you can let the entertainment channels tell you how to feel about the world, or you can sort of like really take the time to try and understand a thing and come to your own conclusions. And I think that is just like such an important part of, I don't know, being an artist. Like if we want to come back to like more specifically about art and art making, I think that just like knowing what's available to you and understanding what tools you have in your toolbox, I think that's a really important, I think that's very important in general, but also just like as a skill to have. Like I am going to continue to learn new things, and that continued learning is going to stimulate my practice.
Yeah. The things, if I can jump in here real quick, I mean, the things are also always changing so fast.
Yeah.
And the general direction, the sense that I get, especially within our own company, is that we're trying to make things easier and easier to use with broader and broader reach. So I actually think that you might maybe not benefit, because you may lose like fundamental understandings of where these things come from, and you may be like a little dissociated from it when you actually gain access to it. But it actually might just be easier to wait until the barrier to entry comes down a little bit on some of these things. So just as a counterpoint there.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, even yesterday, I'm trying to teach myself Godot, which is like a game making engine, I guess you'd call it. And I was reading about some programming stuff. I was trying to figure out the syntax for a specific thing. And there were these people on this forum arguing, as one does on a forum, about whether or not you needed to understand the code or if you could just copy paste implement it. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's so much truth about both sides of that. It's like on the one end, like I'm currently reading this book called Filter World by Kyle Chaika, highly recommend. And it's all about algorithms. And in one of the sections, he's talking about how like, even the people who write the algorithms often don't understand how they fully function, because an algorithm is actually just like a series of algorithms. And when you multiply them onto each other, all of a sudden it is completely obfuscated in terms of how it functions. Mm-hmm. But like, can we still utilize that system to our benefit? I think sometimes yes, and I think sometimes no.
I mean, it's really, you just get back to like, do we understand even the way our own minds work? It's like, no, but can we still use them effectively? Yes. So it's like, the more complex systems get, I mean, we still retain our own human faculties and, are maybe enabled slightly more by these new tools. But I hardly understand anything in life.
So looking at your profile on both your website and just the which I believe is the same thing on our Civitai AiR site, you have a lot of interest and you have a lot of tools in your creative toolbox per se. Because I see here it says analog photography, computer simulations, 3D printing, open source software. Is there anything in particular that you do creatively? Obviously, of course, photography that you find yourself revisiting and being pulled towards more than others, and why do you feel that way about those specific things?
Oh man, I feel like for the longest time it was photography, but I have to tell you. So again, without getting too lost into it, I made a Super Mario World ROM hack, and there has been no greater joy for me than sitting on my couch, pulling up a random Twitch stream and watching someone play a game that I made. It's like, there's a kind of engagement, because like I labored over that thing in the same way that I labored over like This World and Others Like It or any of my other projects. But there was this way that like the person playing the game had to actively engage with my creative decisions in a way that like photographs on a gallery wall sometimes like you don't do that unless you're like, no, I want you to talk me through everything you're looking at right now in this photograph, what you're thinking. Like you can't mine that engagement the way that it just naturally comes when someone is like playing a game. And I have to tell you, not everybody liked the game, but that's a different story. So I think for the longest time it was photography, and I do think it is still photography. And I definitely still think that I work as a photographer, in theory. And that is like sort of where things start and ultimately manifest from. Like I read a lot of photo theory. Like I think even this Filter World book is very much about like photography and visual culture. And like conceptually that stuff really fascinates me. And I think that foregrounds everything that I make. So I suppose it would be photography. And part of that is just because like, I think as humans, we are made to, do pattern recognition, and maybe some of us are more inclined to that than others. And I would say that I probably am. And as someone who's like fascinated by the way things get structured, and I'm at a loss for words, I find myself coming back to photography because it is such a like purely visual language. And so I'm always thinking about things photographically, even if I'm not like pressing the shutter on a camera.
Gotcha. No, that makes total sense. So photography is kind of like your grounding thing.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's always what you come back to. Oh, that's super cool, man. How old were you when you picked up your first camera, and that was like the spark kind of sparked, or was it a slow burn until you realized it was something that you really wanted to pursue?
Oh man, I hit the ground running. I'm not good with dates, but sometime in high school, I got like a little point and shoot camera, and my birthday's in May. I got that for Christmas. So like 5 months later, I had made so many photos on this crappy little point and shoot that my family was like, all right, fair enough, let's go. And they went and got me like a proper DSLR. And I still have that camera somewhere, and I made so many photos on it that the shutter has literally fallen off. Like the camera works, but the sensor is like off of alignment. And so you only get like half a photo. It's totally bizarre, but it's because I just like shot and shot and shot and shot and shot.
Awesome.
And
tool. It's like an index of all of your work. That's great. I love that.
It's such a fun little like Easter egg. I don't think I'll ever get rid of that camera because of it. But
a cool project, just shooting with that. You know, like maybe even like a stitch back on a 4x5.
Oh man.
Well,
like
anyway, now that we have like a pretty good sense of your background and really kind of where your creative interest lies, Chris, why don't you lead us into the AiR program?
Yeah. Or actually, do you think we could take a look at his website real quick just to give folks like a context of like where he's coming from? Can you share that? Yeah. Nice. So if you just go to projects, and then This World and Others Like It is the second tile. So this was the project that really drew me to Drew's work. And I think that just sort of like the abstraction of a form, the way that you're incorporating sort of like fears and optimism about technologies, mapping the landscape, how that folds back onto like a mapping of human civilization. There's just so much here in this work that really attracted me to it. And I wanted to see how you would engage with AI, you know, being that this is so much informed by sort of a technological language or some sort of relationship to technology. At least that was my reading of this body of work, and sort of the impressions that different diagnostic tools can give us of our reality, right? And I really have expressed how much I love that phrase before. And these are all made on 4x5, is that right? Or no, a mix of images?
It's half. So as the project progresses, there are more and more photos that are sort of uncanny valley. And the ones that are probably especially unbelievable were all made using a mapping software. So randomly generating landscapes in a mapping software called Terragen. And then I sort of was like navigating the landscape and finding a location to make a photograph, and then I might like move the sun or whatever. So it was like I sort of tried to take this approach that was very photographic, even though I was operating within a digital space. And obviously in a mapping software like that, there is a pretty heavy emphasis on that kind of approach, because you know, even the tools are, you know, designed with that language built into it. You are moving your camera, you're changing your angle of view, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So it was kind of it was a pretty straightforward one-to-one to kind of build out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, I was really impressed by this body of work. I mean, so were others. That's why it was published, right? And anyway, maybe we can jump to the Figma board now. So yeah, I think coming from this sort of relationship to technology and what I see as a fairly kind of, heterogeneous approach to making images, where you don't have just a strict style where you're doing, you know, just landscape images or just, you know, figurative images or images in a certain style. Like you have like this cosmos of different types of imagery that make up your bodies of work. I'm curious to know just what made you dive into, especially like this first one, where, I mean, your first attempt was what? Training a LoRA using the same image 100 times. So it was like very, very strict parameters. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think I think that's the first thing I put on here, but my memory's not great, but I feel like I remember trying to like drop in This World and Others Like It before I tried anything else. And I felt like the results were kind of lacking. And a lot of that could have just been that it was the very first thing I ever did. And so, you know, it's never obviously going to be just like perfect right out the gate.
Mm-hmm. And for context, this is our Civitai, you know, on-site LoRA trainer that you were using.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm almost positive this came from a conversation that you and I had where I was sort of talking about that. And, you know, I'm like, I'm big on the brainstorm. And so I had like a bunch of random stuff that I was throwing out there, and you were kind of like, that sounds kind of interesting. And I was really interested to see like what this approach would ultimately kind of, what do I want to say? Like what it would ultimately generate. Like, would it be so strict that you would just get the same image over and over and over again? Or would it kind of fall apart? And there were two sort of like different trainings that I did, and one fell apart. And that one, it was like one image inserted one time. And for whatever reason, that's that like middle image of the top three there, where it just got like totally jacked up. And I don't really like understand why that's different from introducing the same image 100 times. Because that's the only difference between these two data sets. But regardless, the other one was kind of interesting to me because it, you know, when you train something like that so heavily on like one specific detail, what I found is that ultimately it picks up on like the most graphic details and just like replicates them. And that was like especially interesting to me with this photo because it sort of created all these different variations of the birds on the window. So like for context, the photo is the top, like the original photo, excuse me, is that top left image in this window. And that's a photo that is from a current project I'm working on. And those are actual vinyl cut duck hunt birds that are on an actual window in my studio that I photographed. And so
super cool.
Thank you. The output was kind of interesting to me. And I think that sort of set me off on a bit of a journey of like, okay, how can I either make this fall apart even more or, you know, maybe get somewhere kind of exciting where it's not falling apart, but it is doing something kind of wild. I think if you click on that, it'll play. It's like a little GIF. Maybe
Okay,
not.
you stacked all of these outputs.
Yeah, no, I think this is the board is only going to let us view it like this.
Oh, bummer.
Oh yeah, you actually have to be in. If you click the Figma icon, I think it'll take you into the actual.
Oh, there we go.
You might have to be logged in though. Interesting.
Bummer.
I thought it would take you in if you clicked like his name. If you go back to that board.
All right, give me 1 second. Let me just try to log in and do it off the air here.
Yeah. I know that from the studio view, if you click the bottom left-hand corner, like if you scroll down on this page and click his name, it should link you to the actual board, which that's a drawback of Figma, but it's embedded. It doesn't allow you to play video. You have to be like in it.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
No, it won't just take me to the board.
If you click his name in the bottom left-hand corner, no, that didn't work. Let's go.
There we go. Okay, cool.
Yeah, now you see me floating around with my mouse.
Yeah. Me too. Hello.
Boom. Okay.
Hey.
Love it.
Yeah, so that one's like particularly aggressive. There are a couple more GIFs in here that are not so fast with their frame rate. They're a little bit nicer to look at. But yeah, I'm fairly certain that this came from a conversation that Chris and I had where I was just kind of like, oh shit, like I wonder what would happen if I sort of trained something on the same image again and again and again. It's kind of like the exact opposite. Like it was like the far end of the extreme. It was like, rather than introducing a bunch of photos that are very disparate, what if we do the exact opposite?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's like there's something about this approach too, which is quite brutal. I think like it's kind of a brutalist technique to just be like
a little bit. It gives that vibe. But I also think that just the idea of doing this to like try to use the LoRA trainer, right, to break something apart is so other direction from what it's actually used for, that that's how you figure out the coolest things with all this stuff is like using everything in the most unconventional way you can think of, which is usually completely opposite the way it's meant to be used.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm totally that annoying guy that like when I play a game for the first time, I'm kind of like, I know the game wants me to go this direction, but what if I went that way? Like, how far can I go if I go that way? What if I just like totally jack this up?
Yeah. Yeah. The open world, like going all the way to the edge.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah.
So after this happened, then where did you go from here?
So if you follow along on my little journey, it's a spiral if you zoom out, because heaven forbid I make a straight line.
Before we jump into that, can you just tell me, was that the same prompt over and over again, or were you just how are you outputting that? Do you remember?
I think it was slightly different prompts.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that no matter what I put on that LoRA, it was just like, here are some birds in a window.
Yep. Yep.
Like, oh, you want birds in a window.
And that's what I really wanted to hit on, is that like this LoRA, like you actually made it so it could only produce a very, very small gamut of images, like literally just this, with like, it's almost like you were just stuck in this dream world where you couldn't escape no matter what you prompted, right? Which I find to be just a fascinating inversion of what AI is typically used for. Like usually it's used to expand the box of like what's possible, and you've really like trapped it inside of its own box.
Yeah, it was actually like frustrating to a degree, because I was like, okay, but I want a little bit more leeway here.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get it to give it to me.
Maybe you should have done like 50 and then like one of a different image or something. But anyway, sorry, on to the next one. I think I cut you off there, Tyler.
No, all good. Yeah, so where did that lead you?
So these next two images that you're looking at are from the same project, and it's like it's a diptych, and if you kind of zoom in on that right one, you can see there's a drone in the middle of the window. And so these two photographs are like me photographing the drone and the drone photographing me. And to kind of like touch back on something that Chris said before, it's like my work is always very engaged in like our relationship to technology. And I think especially in an image like this, a lot of people, I think, address a lot of anxiety to it. It's sort of like this fear of being surveilled, as if like our data isn't just like on the market always. And so I always, like, when I made this, I thought it was funny, and then I showed it to people and they were like, that's actually terrifying. So fun little inversion from like expectation and viewer perception. But this image, because I think the reason I jumped to these two images to do trainings, so to jump ahead a little bit, I did 50 images of each and dropped that into a LoRA. And so it was like a similar approach, but instead of having one image, we now have two. But the reason that I went this way is because I was kind of like, there's just enough of like a consistency where like the formal component of the image is the exact same across the two images. And so I sort of was like, oh, well, that might be interesting. Like that might produce some interesting stuff. And it had way more leniency, as, you know, sort of the smattering of random things that I dropped in that I managed to kind of like get out of that LoRA kind of show. But what was always really consistent, it almost always had that sort of same archway that the original two images had, or it had the grid, or it really liked the siding material. A lot of the images I generated had that siding material. It was really eager to put that in the photos. And I think
This
part of
bottom,
why
this bottom middle one makes me anxious. This one right here, this one, like, just this is looking at this gives me like some weird anxiety.
there are more, and we'll get to that eventually, but there were a lot that because the one image from the original two has that, like, you can see my silhouette in the window. It also picked up on that. And so there's a lot of instances of an image like the one you're talking about being creepy, where not only is it creepy, it also like has a figure in it. And
which one?
I didn't put one of those on here, but it was really common in like the output images that I'd get to get sort of a corridor. And then at the end of the corridor, there'd be a person.
Which it almost like, it would be expected a little, right? Like it shouldn't be surprising because you were in the reflection in this image. However, seeing these images with no people in them, like part of me, and this is very left field AI thinking, and probably someone who uses this stuff way too much, right? But part of me is like, is that the AI trying to communicate something to us back?
I don't know. I will say, I think it's really interesting how much it picked up on my figure being in that left image of the diptych, because in my mind, like, it's such a subtle detail.
Yeah.
But the silhouette was enough for it to just kind of go, yep, there's definitely a body there. That's definitely a human. And so we're definitely going to be throwing that into a lot of the images that you generate.
Yeah, man. The more I look at these, even the ones that don't immediately give me like a, oh, I don't like this kind of reaction, the longer you look at them, the more you realize how kind of like nonsensical the makeup is, but it still kind of makes sense at the same time, which is like, I find it so, that's the part I find so fascinating about all this. And what I love about all this is like, these are not images that we probably even would have like thought of creating, but then just seeing what it spits out to you after you feed just these two other images into it, seeing this could inspire a whole nother body of work for you, right?
Potentially. I mean, that was kind of my hope, was that it might give me ideas for images. Again, kind of treating it like a diagnostic tool. I think the thing that fascinated me the most about these is like that the environments are kind of convincing. Like there's always, every once in a while, you'll see those articles I don't even know that it's fair to call it an article. It's more like just a collection of random images that someone is calling an article, where it's like, look at these terrible McMansion designs or whatever. And it's like a window going to nowhere. Like there's just so many instances of like architectural decisions that make no sense. Yeah. And it's almost like the AI is just like replicating bad decision making.
Yeah, it is. It has captured at least the ones that you've selected, maybe. And there's probably a lot of selection bias here because, like you said, there were some of the figures that you left out.
Yeah,
which I think is another thing in your work with you tend to avoid the figure, which I think you're approaching now in this newer body of work. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah,
but I think that a bit of what you were touching on, Tyler, is this what I would call an uncanny feeling, where you get a sense of a real space. And it doesn't quite make sense, but you get the feeling that it should make sense and that it sort of draws you in. And then it maybe evokes a memory of some sort that makes you uncomfortable because you sort of remember what it's like to be in that space, but you could never actually access it. There's that sort of like feeling of like, I think somebody once called it like a unhomeliness or a feeling of home that you can't quite access that is captured in this, in like the feeling of the uncanny. So yeah, again, a lot of like bias here, selection bias, but I think that it was successful in getting that sort of like distanced yet, I think very like interior psychological feel of a lot of of these two images, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Drew, you haven't really dived into any of like the AI animation stuff, right? Too much, like have you? No. So I'm looking at these images and I can already tell that like just dropping these into a couple workflows that I have just sitting on my computer could generate some really just like interesting infinite zoom hallway creepy things that like, you know, you put some VHS static over it and some like really unsettling text or something, and there you go.
Yeah, we're in the back rooms.
Yeah, no, dude, this is super cool. It's funny too because I was like, you know, looking at it like this, it's just like, okay, this is all like this. It's like, you know, pictures of windows and houses, but once you zoom in and you really start to pay attention to the details, it does become like borderline creepy. So no, I love this.
Yeah, and I think that like reflects the original too, like Chris was saying.
Yep.
Like the tone is there. Say again.
You did a GIF of these then, I think is the next step, right?
Yeah, I started to get kind of biased, and I was like, okay, I'm like really interested in that, the way it's like really leaning into that shape. And like some prompts were generating that a little bit more than others. Like if I included the word frame, it really wanted to include this shape. And I totally like, I was really into this idea of there being like a consistent shape. And I like really wanted to do something with that. And that's kind of where I went next and experienced like lots of failure.
Okay, so let's get into talking about that, because a lot of times with a lot of stuff that we do on here, even though everyone knows that failing fast and failing often is the name of the game to get to what to get to any resemblance of what you were hoping to get to, right? You have to fail a bunch of times to get to the actual thing that you wanted to make. But yeah, let's talk about what that looked like. So, because so far looking like really great stuff and success to me. So what happened after that?
I feel like I threw away a lot of the lessons and just like tried different stuff and it just didn't work. So at this point I was like, okay, introducing the same image a bunch of times is producing some bias, I feel like. And I mean bias in this context of like, it's consistently giving me the shape of this window, for example. And I was like, okay, can I do that with any shape? And so I started introducing like this first attempt on the left is just like this weird random shape that I made. I wanted to introduce something that wasn't like really understood. Like I didn't want to do a circle, for example. even though I do kind of walk my way back to a circle, but that's for in a couple minutes. I was like, if I give it this really random shape, can it replicate that? And so I produced a bunch of different versions of this shape, different colors on different backgrounds. And I copied and pasted them a bunch of times to try and create that same like reinforcement of the shape above all else. And the output just, it almost like completely ignored the shape whenever I tried to utilize it. Or it did stuff like this here where it's just like complete abstraction. And I think I think some folks would look at that and be like, oh, this is interesting. I can sort of take this somewhere, but it's not what I was wanting. So I kind of jumped ship and kept trying. I tried some other variations. Like I felt like maybe I was introducing too much texture into the first data set. And so I went back to strictly just different colors on different backgrounds. That also produced just like very heavily abstracted results. And I just kept walking back until we get to this like tall section on the left where it's just a circle, or on the right, sorry, directions are hard. And I at first was like, oh man, the circle is working. And then I removed the LoRA and used the same prompts and I got the exact same results. And I was like, it's because it's a circle, and introducing round or circle into the prompt is enough for it to kind of go, oh yeah, you want something round. So then I was like, cool. Well, that was like a fun little diatribe that I went on, but ultimately didn't really kind of pan out, which was kind of a bummer. But I have theories on why that happened. But ultimately, yeah, it was like a bunch of testing, a bunch of playing around, and a lot of failure in this sort of like moment of my time with Civitai.
Gotcha. Well, I would definitely say that this whole thing wasn't for naught, because this was super cool, but even more so, I think everything you did down here with just these two images, I would like to see you revisit the idea of training a model or a LoRA on your entire camera roll and just see what type of like crazy, weird, surreal world that model builds out of what's in your phone.
I mean, maybe. I definitely don't think it was a failure either. I did come back to that 2-image LoRA at the end, and there's just like a few more instances. And I think like part of why I feel like the shape failed was there wasn't enough for it to sort of latch onto. Like, I think that these two photographs worked because there's like texture, there's information, there's all of these like features, as opposed to just like, here's a shape. Yep. Because all sorts of prompts were giving me that shape above all else. And so, had I had more time, I would have, what I wanted to do, the whole reason I went down this long shape diatribe was I wanted to sort of create either like a video or like a GIF that's similar to the one of the like frames of this same visual. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to match the archway. Like I think that the GIF I made was just like a proof of concept, and you can see the shape of it jumps all over the place. But what I wanted to do is I wanted that like most defining like visual element of all of these images to match perfectly. Because I just like, I thought that would be a really interesting sort of like meditative visual thing, where the shape is reinforced, but the visuals are constantly changing. And so even though you can't latch on to any one image, you are still like understanding what it is that you're looking at.
Tyler, you've got some workflows you were just saying that could do that, right?
Well, not that per se, but it's more so like, feed it an image, feed it a motion LoRA that was trained on some type of motion that was extracted from a short video clip, and then it takes the image you gave it and it tries to inject the motion
So a zoom.
Yeah. So like I have motion LoRa's that were trained on hyperlapses or on fly-ins with drones through tunnels and whatnot. And I'm just like, I'm looking at the hallway, and that would be the perfect use case for a motion LoRa like that.
Can you train a motion LoRa on Michael Snow's 1967 experimental film Wavelength? Have either of you seen that? It's actually, yeah. Anyway.
No, go on. I don't know. I have no idea what that is.
It's like a seminal experimental film. It's literally a 45-minute Zoom that takes you through an apartment, and like things are happening and like the soundscape and also like visually, but then it's literally, though, the whole film is a 45-minute, very slow Zoom where you're zooming in and in and in and in and in on the screen, eventually. And I think that's almost like what you were going for, is this like experience of a space that you could travel through without, like you said, like latching onto anything, in that sort of meditative way that like, yeah, I think that would be really interesting. Because I do think that the GIF is too fast. You lose some of that uncanny feeling where you're like realizing that there is more there that's unexplained that you can see, but you don't really know why. Like that stuff sort of blurs by you in the GIF. So it would be cool to have it slower.
Here, wait, let me just show you an example of something I'm referring to. I don't want to hijack the conversation with this, but just like stuff like this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and this guy just does a whole bunch of this type of stuff with this really kind of like architectural stuff. But the images you produced would be perfect for this type of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is total backrooms.
But okay, so then so this was kind of like the end point of the project here, correct?
Yeah, I was sort of like out of time, and for context, what that means is like, because I'm in grad school, like next week I have to go back to writing and making photos and, I don't know, paying attention in class. So I was like, I can't give more to this, but I wanted to give like a little bit more. And there were a couple more sort of like loose end details that I thought were really interesting. And so I kind of just like spent some time generating some images, because there were a couple things. This LoRa was like very fruitful for me. It was really fun because there were so many different things that it was doing depending on what I prompted it with. And that was cool to me in the way that like if I sort of like leaned into the frame, I could get the shape. And in this instance, if I leaned into the grid, it kept giving me variations on the grid of the window. Mm-hmm. And that was just like really fascinating to me. And so I spent some time with that LoRa, because again, it was like just very fruitful for me. Because I think this is also something that could be really interesting. I think like, because I don't see any of this as like deeply successful, even though I love failure. If you spend more time with my work, you'll see there's a lot of conversation about failure in my practice. If nothing else, I like the idea that this exists and it is here, and someone might look at all of this and kind of go, oh, cool. These are interesting ideas, and I'm going to take them now. Because without going like super deep off on a tangent, there's a great quote from an artist whose name will come back to me in 3 minutes. And he basically is talking about how like when you make something and you put it onto the world, it isn't really yours anymore. Mm-hmm. It sort of participates in a broader conversation. And I'm kind of like, maybe this is fruitful for someone. It's definitely been fruitful for me. But yeah, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time playing around with the grid and like prompting those, like those details of the LoRa, for lack of a better phrasing, because again, there were like so many different things that depending on what I prompted it with, it would sort of focus in on. And that was just really fascinating to me. It was almost like this LoRa had 2 or 3 different pieces that depending on how you spoke to it, it sort of gave you those results instead of other ones.
Yeah.
And so
I think there's also something that's becoming apparent to me, like the more that I look at these as well, which is like just that visual the visual repetition of like window frames versus window bars, and like sort of this idea of being like trapped inside of like a window or like a mirrored space or like a one-way mirror, and how that relates to sort of being in a prison. There's also just like having lived in LA for a long time. It's funny how one-to-one this matches up with like the window bars that they actually put over all the buildings there. So it's sort of like this idea of like safety in a suburban environment versus like being trapped in that in like sort of the prison complex. And there's like a lot of ideas that are swirling with just that sort of window frame form that sort of come out as you teased it out of the AI, which I think is really, it's an interesting kind of associative space to play in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I love that.
Man. I love this. I would not say this was a failure at all, even though it strayed far away from what the original like idea and intention was. I think that's just the nature of being creative and kind of letting the project take you where the project wants to take you.
Totally. I completely agree with that. Like I very much see failure as a destination.
That is, listen, it is something that I say, I parrot on this stream often, which is fail fast and fail often. And the great thing about these tools, the absolute best thing about any variation of generative tools to me is that these now let us get from idea to failure quicker than ever, so we can iterate on the original idea even faster, and hopefully through that get to our destination even faster because of how quickly we're able to just speed run the failures.
Yep. Totally.
Oh man, absolutely great stuff. Chris, is there anything that we missed that you want to get out there before we kind of get into the wrap-up zone here?
I don't think so. I mean, we keep kind of like associating on these images for a long time, but I really enjoyed having you in the program, Drew. So thank you for participating. I look forward to keeping up with your work. And yeah, I think it was just really a great time getting to talk to you every week in our studio visits. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
I did too. I appreciate the invite. I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
Dude, well, Drew, tell all the people kind of what you got going on now, what you're going to be working on now that you've wrapped this up with the AIR program, and where they can find you if they want to keep up with you online.
Oh man, definitely my website. I think my website will give you everything you need in terms of links.
I'm going to drop that in the chat for everyone here.
Right? Yeah, I think I need to add some things to it. Anyways, that's like, where all my projects are. Right now I'm working on, I guess I am working on my thesis. So like A Line in the Sand is the current project that's behind a password. So one day you will be allowed to see it, but not yet. The cameras are also a thing. There's a link to that on the About page on my website. There's my ROM hack. If you want to play my ROM hack, all the information is there. It's under projects. You can download it. Also, I love a video essay. And this video essay that I wrote about the ROM hack right here kind of blew up, at least compared to what kind of numbers my videos normally do. And I gained like 200 subscribers from that video. So anyways, that's kind of cool.
YouTube link to that video is in the chat, guys, if you want to check it out.
It's apparently people are really into it. I made it. I showed it to my partner and I was like, do you think this is corny? And she was like, yeah, it's kind of corny. And I was like, I'm posting it. And then people were like, I love this video. So anyway,
hey man, the corny stuff is what it like our most greatest like magnum opus, what we would consider the pinnacle of our current artistic endeavors, are very rarely the things that are going to resonate with the masses. It's usually the thing where like, should I put this out there? I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's what I realized when I posted it and it kind of blew up. I was like, oh, people like really resonate with this. It's all about, the video is all about failure. And there's, if you go through my website and you look at my other projects, there's other videos that I've written for projects that are also about failure. Again, I love a failure. I mean, I feel like that's the only plug I really need to make is my website. Everything is kind of linked on there. And whenever I, drop new projects, they make their way onto there. Yeah, you can read up on all the things I've done.
Man.
I think my email's on there. Yeah. So, if you want to ask me a question, you can email me or hit me up on Instagram.
I'll put the links to your Instagram and your Patreon in the chat for anyone that wants to check this all out.
Oh yeah. That's a good plug. I do have a Patreon and it does help sustain my art practice. So if you were like, man, this guy's kind of cool, I'd like to see his work and give him money, that's where you do that.
So before we sign off here, any last takeaways from just your time spent with this?
Oh man, big question.
Make it quick.
Again, I feel like I ended where I started, which is like, this is a diagnostic tool, and I feel like what I walk away from this all with is like an understanding of those tools, and I still have some buzz, and if I have an idea later on, I know where to go to like see out those ideas or sort of implement those brainstorming processes. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I had fun, and I feel like I am probably better for having spent the time coming to understand generative AI a little bit better.
Awesome. Well, just know if you want to go down that rabbit hole anymore to figure out how to further incorporate it into your work, that the rabbit hole is much, much deeper than what you have witnessed. So just know that there is an entire web of potential things that you could touch to incorporate into your work that I think you would have a really fun time with.
That's the sense that I get. And we'll see if I ever get there, but I'm kind of terrified of it. It's like, it's so deep that it kind of scares me.
You and everyone else right now. But no, Drew, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us and giving us some insight into everything that you do. I thought that was wildly fascinating. I thought the stuff that you made was super, super cool. And it's not a direction that you see people try to go too often, which even just seeing that gives me a couple ideas of ways that I could kind of sprawl out with the things that I've been doing. So thank you.
Awesome. Hey, Tyler,
I love that.
The AIR program as well in the chat.
Yes.
air.civitai.com. So if anybody wants to go and see Drew's Figma board that he's been working in, or any of the other artists' Figma board, you can literally watch real time as they're building out their ideas, workflows, their projects. Go to air.civitai.com. You can also apply to be an artist in residence. And keep track there. We release bi-weekly studio updates that I write, kind of reflecting on all the work that's being done in the AIR program. So you can read those there as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun. Like it was interesting to read those, especially even as someone who's doing the thing. Cause like, obviously I'm not interacting with, all the other artists. So like, it's kind of a fun read. I recommend going to the website and giving it a read. So
that's
awesome.
In the feed section, by the way, if you want to go there.
And Chris, we're always taking applications for this, correct?
Yep, it's rolling applications. So apply anytime, and we'll take a look at your work.
Awesome. Well, Chris, Drew, thank you guys so much for joining me. This was a whole lot of fun for me. I selfishly get a lot out of these things every time that I do them. It's why I enjoy doing them every week, because this helps me expand my artistic endeavors. And hopefully through my selfishness, it helps everyone else that is watching this.
I love that.
But no, thank you guys. I feel free to hang around just for a few minutes so we can just do a quick little debrief. Gonna just plug tomorrow's stream real quick. So yeah, guys, tomorrow at 3 p.m. Pacific, we are going to be having a very special AI Artist Hour. It's going to be myself and the one and only Enigmatic E, and we are going to be doing a AI, Twitter, X, social media, web crawl, and watching, reviewing, and reacting to a lot of the coolest stuff that we've seen throughout the week. And yeah, come hang out with me and E tomorrow, and we're going to have a good time at 3 p.m. Pacific. Appreciate you all. This is Civitai.com. Make sure you go check out air.civitai.com. If you have not already and you are interested in taking a journey like Drew did, apply for the AIR program. Come be one of our artists in residence. Chris is always looking for new people to add to the cohort. And yeah, man, we appreciate you guys. If you have not, go get your flux on the website, because we have a new maintenance page contest going on. And with the capabilities of Flux now, it is absolutely insane what you can create. And we want to see the images you guys create and all the crazy things that you do. So get fluxed. This is Civitai.com. I am Tyler. I will see you guys tomorrow for the AI Artist Hour with Enigmatic E at 3 p.m. Pacific. Happy Thursday, everyone. Peace.